Florida is a community of activists that unites to uphold the absolute separation of church and state. And what we do is look for instances of violations of church-state issues. Government shouldn't be doing prayers. Government doesn't have constitutional rights. Citizens have constitutional rights.
The intelligent design crowd, I think, is everywhere.
If we find that government schools are teaching creationism, then we would get involved.
I feel I can contribute something positive to society and to my community.
It's an absolute fight that we must make.
It's personally very, very satisfying to be involved in something I believe in. The Atheists of Florida is a statewide organization, and I belong to the Lakeland, Florida branch of it.
Right now we have 8 chapters, and we're growing very rapidly.
We are citizens. We obey the law. We are trying to make this world a good place, and we have value.
It's absolutely important for atheists and citizens, not just atheists, but citizens need to take this stand, because if we don't now, who? If not now, when?
Well, that was the ad from Atheists of Florida. I thought it was very impressive. And one of the voices on there was EllenBeth Wachs, who is on the show with us tonight. EllenBeth, thank you for joining the God Discussion Show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here and be able to voice my opinion for once.
Well, we love opinions here. You know, Atheists of Florida is really quite impressive, and a lot of that is because of the activism that you have done, and actually put Atheists of Florida on the national map, so to speak. You know, making the headlines because you were arrested because of some of your activism in protecting separation of church and state. There's also a controversy going on with respect to your resignation from the organization, as well as the resignation of John Kiefer, who is the president. Before we get into that, I would like to touch just a little bit about your activism for people who may not be familiar. Can you tell us a little bit? Oh, and I do need to mention here, just for people who are listening, I did write to Atheists of Florida to allow them to give their point of view, and I have not heard back, so I just need to say that. But anyway, EllenBeth, you were arrested. One of the issues was that the county sheriff was giving away basketball hoops to churches. Can you tell us a little bit about that, understanding that some of the people in this audience may be new to this story?
Yes. Well, actually, my activism started long before that when I went to my local city commission and started protesting their prayer rituals. They were bringing church into city government meetings, and I had a problem with that. I didn't think that was appropriate. So myself, along with some other members of my Lakeland chapter, went there and asked them, I thought, very reasonably, if they could switch to a moment of seated silence. And that didn't go over well. So this is actually part of the big picture of what occurred with this sheriff, because when I protested the sheriff donating all of this basketball equipment to the local churches, one of the affiants on the arrest warrant just so happened to be the mayor that I am suing to stop the prayer invocations.
Okay.
So what happened was, it was almost exactly a year ago, is that I was sitting right around before the phony day that they have designated as the Jesus character's birth, December 25th, and Sheriff Grady Judd decided he was going to have a press conference, and he's very much in favor of promoting himself. So he held a press conference, and I'm sitting there having my coffee one morning, and he says, I was driving by the jail, and I saw the inmates playing basketball, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. And I didn't want the hard-working taxpayers of Polk County to have to drive by and see these inmates playing jail while they're out working hard. So I decided to play Santa Claus and donate these basketball hoops to local churches. And I said, oh, whoa, flag on that play.
Well, yeah, because these basketball hoops would have been paid for out of public funds. To be, was he consulting with Sheriff Joe Arpaio from my state?
He loved Sheriff Joe. He actually aspires to be Sheriff Joe. As a matter of fact, one of his last things that he has done was he didn't go to pink underwear for the male inmates. He actually took all of their underwear away.
Oh no. Oh, that's what
you know what I want my criminals. Not only do I want them to be nice and locked in, I also want them chafing, because that's going to make them much less violent.
So what I did was I sent a cease and desist letter to him saying, you can't do this. And then I sent some public records requests. And what I found out was that he immediately started investigating me. And in about March of this year, close to 20 sheriff's deputies knocked on my door with a crime scene investigation vans and SWAT team, and came in and just raided my house with an arrest warrant for the unauthorized practice of law.
How many did you say, 20?
Close to 20, with guns drawn pointed at my employees' heads.
Oh, good grief.
Unauthorized practice of law?
Yes.
Wait, how can there be an unauthorized practice of law? Isn't the practice of law, aren't you authorized, assuming you are practicing the law?
Okay, well, I was not practicing law. I am a retired attorney from Pennsylvania, and I signed my letters ESQ. So they deemed that practicing law.
No.
Of course, it's all a farce. What you cannot do is actually challenge this sheriff. So
after these 20, people show up with their guns and everything else, but did they haul you off to jail, or what happened?
Oh yes, absolutely. They hauled me off to jail, and they trashed my house from top to bottom. And we're talking about furniture overturned, mattresses off the bed, drawers upended. They rifled my underwear drawer. I mean, this was a full-fledged search, like they were looking for Osama bin Laden.
You know what disturbs me about this? Now, I know you didn't hear the first part of the show because you were working, but we've been talking all along about this Christian nationalism and separation of church and state issues, and this big divide that seems to be taking place in our country right now. And for somebody like you to raise this issue and say, look, you guys are misappropriating funds and doing this, all of a sudden you're the center of a witch hunt. There's something so wrong about that to me. Is this common or in your county, or is it just you that they decided to target?
Well, we have to go back to the fact that I have become the most vocal atheist activist in Polk County, and I've also been challenging them in other issues as well. I was suing them in Lakeland for bringing church into the government. We also protested at the Polk County School Board because they pray there as well. As a matter of fact, John Kiefer got arrested at the Polk County School Board simply for not praying.
We were talking about a theocracy, and boy, does that sound like it. You say you don't like this Christian stuff, and all of a sudden you're arrested.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's why people like you are so important, and John, and I would say Freedom from Religion Foundation and Americans United for Separation of Church and State and People for the American Way. But you're willing to put yourself on the line to protect what is good for all of us. And I think that is why this situation that's going on with Atheists of Florida has a lot of people very upset. And by the way, our call-in line is 914-338-0452. Now, I guess what's creating the big stir is that you and John resigned abruptly. Can you, on what, the 6th was it? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, this was such a farce of a board meeting. We're in the middle of elections, and this has been the first contested election in Atheists of Florida organization's history in, I think, about 15 years. Now, up until this point, Atheists of Florida, up until John and I started being really active activists, Atheists of Florida has been mostly a social club and doing very little. John came along, and with Rob Curry's help, and I'm going to be a little bit humble, a little bit of my help, we turned it around and actually started fulfilling the mission of the founder, Christos Anatakos, who founded this organization to be an activist organization, to get out there and actually do activism to uphold the separation of church and state. What's been going on is that up until this point, whoever came into this organization and wanted to be a board member got seated as a board member because the bylaws were written as such where you could have up to 24 board members. Just recently, the bylaws got changed in August where there was only going to be 10 at-large board members. So this forced an election. Now, what happened was nominations opened up. People submitted nominations. Certain people missed the deadline for the nominations when they closed. Certain other people didn't like the fact that certain people missed this deadline. When we started doing the bet, and John was still the president at this point, and he named an elections committee to start the balloting process. Well, the chairman, Ed EllenBeth, decided that he was going to stop this election. Come hither or high water. Come higher, whatever the phrase is. You know what I mean. I'm so tired. It's been a long week. And declared John's election committee naming tardy. Well, there's nothing in the bylaws that says John has a deadline to name this elections committee. There's nothing in the bylaws that says the elections committee is even the people that are the ones to prepare the ballots. So there's several background stories that go on with this, and the most overriding one is if that certain people don't win this election, they get nominated, they get thrown off the board, and then a certain purchase of a building doesn't get fulfilled.
Can you run that by again?
The chairperson has been pushing, Ed EllenBeth has been pushing Atheists of Florida to buy his building where we currently meet.
Okay, I wanted to stress that point for everybody. That's why I asked, how much was this building?
Well, that is in dispute. Now, he's come up with his appraisal. He's been pushing this appraisal on us for about a year, which is obviously an old appraisal, and I don't have the figure in front of me, but it was, I think, $295,000. And, of course, at the June meeting, we were all saying, well, you're giving us a figure that's really old. It has to be, appraised again. And John and I have been the vocal opponents against the purchase of this building since it's been brought up.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is,
there might be a slight conflict of interest. Is that what you're possibly suggesting here?
Well, I have actually, not possibly suggesting, I brought it up in the board meeting. I brought it up several times. And aside from the conflict of interest, this building, even if they were to buy a building, this building is not the appropriate building for the organization. It simply doesn't meet the needs of the organization.
Well, and not only that, it's not like a super huge organization with millions and millions of dollars at its disposal like some of these Christian groups that we've been discussing. It almost pushes you in a corner, I would think, of, are we going to have a meeting place, or are we going to actually go out there and do some things, and maybe by advertising to get people aware of the issues and things of that nature? Was that part of the consideration there?
Well, that was part of the consideration, as a matter of fact, because it came up in that if we pay all of our money that we have to attorney's fees to defend separation of church and state, there's not going to be any money to buy the building.
Yeah, we've got a caller. This is a 330 area code. Let's
yes,
see if that
hello.
comes on. Hello. Thank you for calling the show, 330. Did you have a question for EllenBeth?
Yes, a couple of questions. My name's Brandon. EllenBeth knows me. I've been a member of AOF for a few years now. I'm a lifetime member. My wife was also a member.
Hey, Brandon.
Hi. Matt Cooper actually gave me a phone call today. I guess this is something that he's calling everybody on the member roster. And he left a voicemail saying that he would like anybody with questions about what's going on to call in. So I took him up on that offer. I assume because he's calling everybody, he's calling in an official capacity to represent AOF now as it stands in its current leadership. Basically, some of the things, I just want to give you a rundown, some of the things he told me, and these are my own views, these are coming from him. I asked him a bunch of different questions about what was going on. He said that the EllenBeth and John appeared to have taken action in order to control all aspects of Atheists of Florida. The accusation is that they took over the AOF registration with the state and switched the registration to an address that was originated from EllenBeth. I'm not sure if he mentioned that it was her residence or a P.O. box, so I'm not sure. He didn't give me the address, of course. Also, he stated that they took control of the website from the webmaster. I asked why they would do this. I wanted to know what their motive would be, and he said that their justification was, and this was a quote from him, that the president has the right to do whatever he wants. I guess he was saying that like it was quoted from John Keeper himself. Other accusations included that they deleted an email account for, I guess, some election committee, and that EllenBeth and John constructed the paper ballots for this current election that were to be sent out in the mail in private, which was against the organization's bylaws. Now, I'm just calling in to give you guys, kind of a where they stand and what they're telling their members.
The phrase "the president can do anything he wants" that didn't really work out too well for Nixon.
Well,
I think the gentleman should learn a little bit from history.
Yeah, let me tell you that Matt Cooper happens to be the person who submitted his nomination late and who was left off the ballot. Okay, so there's a little bit of bias here. If you look at the bylaws, you will see that there is nothing in the bylaws that says any particular person has to create the ballot. I have been open and forthright and transparent about everything. I have posted the bylaws. I have posted all the minutes for the last year. So I am not the one who's trying to shut people up and shut people out.
Right, and that's what I was also concerned about. The biggest thing I think when I read in the email that they sent out was about the financial misappropriations, because of course no member of an organization wants to hear that the funds that he or she donated is being misappropriated. So I was very interested in that. What Matt Cooper told me about that was he said that EllenBeth and John were spending large amounts of money without approval for legal expenses and did not provide receipts. So the board ended up passing a resolution that anything over $1,000 had to be approved by an oversight committee. Also, they said that EllenBeth and John used money for their own personal cases, and those receipts went directly from the lawyer to EllenBeth. Then he said that there was a large check made out for over $1,000. He didn't say the specific amount, just over $1,000, written by John to a lawyer that was new to the AOF board, and it was apparently for EllenBeth's legal defense fund, but was for a case that was later dropped. He said, Matt Cooper said that he personally talked to that lawyer, and that lawyer told him that he was not involved in any case. So I'd like to hear a comment on that.
Well, that would be ridiculous, because if I had a lawyer, don't you think any lawyer I had would not be talking to Matt Cooper about any of my cases?
Right, yeah, that came up too. Where's the confidentiality if he would just blab?
Yeah. So does that make any sense? Yeah, I mean, think about this. Now, if you saw Jen Hancock's article the next day where AOF I forget what the title was. It says, all financial transactions were approved by the board. So if he is still going around spreading vicious lies that we spent money that we weren't entitled to, that's a vicious lie. And let me make something very, very clear. I have not spent one dime of Atheists of Florida money. I have not signed one check. I have not had access to any of Atheists of Florida money. So for them to even say anything remotely like that is incredibly not negligent, it's defamatory.
Slandering.
And it's totally slandering. They know very well that I have not had access to any of the money.
How big of an organization is this, EllenBeth, that these concerns are being thrown around? Is this a huge organization? How many members?
Well, from what they posted in I think with the Ledger article, they're quoting 135 members. I can tell you from the rolls that I saw that it was about 180. Now, this is concerning to me because I'm wondering who they're disenfranchising if they're only saying 135 people when I'm well aware that there's more than 135 people. I reached out to Ed and Tracy Thomas, the secretary, and I included them to be a part of this election process. They refused. They absolutely didn't want to have any part of this. It wasn't as if I didn't try to include other people in the election committee.
Now, you said the Ledger. Is this like a city newspaper or a state newspaper?
That's the local paper.
Okay, so if this is making the local paper that doesn't really have, I can see it being in the Examiner and things like that focus on these, areas like atheism or humanism. But if it's making the regular newspaper, is this something that the community is looking at and sort of judging atheists?
Oh, of course.
Of Florida
without
over?
a doubt. They don't seem to understand the ramifications of what they have done. Deborah, with trying to be a little bit humble here, I am a celebrity in Polk County. So anything I do gets reported on.
Oh, and so are they like clapping their hands saying, woohoo, look at what's happening to these
all you have to do is go to the article. All you have to do is go to the article and look at the comments that were made about my getting ousted, and you will see that what Atheists of Florida did by ousting John and I is allow the Christian fundamentalists in Polk County a huge win.
I'd like to interject, Deborah, if I could, and say about those comments on that article. They're written through Facebook, but they're comments on the article anybody can read. I don't usually post on things like that, but I felt the need to even post look, these people posting that they're just spitting out this vitriol and hate. They're almost twice my age. They could be old enough to be my parents. And I had to sit here and say, look, grow up. That's pretty sad, and it does reflect not on Christianity in general, because I don't generalize like that, but it does reflect on the community in Lakeland and what EllenBeth is up against just being in Lakeland, and let alone dealing with everything that's happening right now with AOF.
So are you in the same Lakeland? Is that the same area where that weird guy that has all the tattoos on and had it like a revival and he kicks people? Is that the same area?
That's it. That is
good
it.
grief. What is his name? Todd. I can't remember who he is.
Todd
Bentley. Todd Bentley. The Lakeland. Oh, good grief. So you're in the middle of that atmosphere, and this is. Oh my gosh. That kind of puts the whole thing right into perspective right there. Well, so, caller, I forgot your name. I'm sorry about that. Brandon, I'm sorry. Did you want to add something to this? Because I'm not quite as familiar with what's going on as you would be.
Right, and actually I think when it comes to you and I, we probably know about the same amount of stuff at this point. The thing about it is I cannot rule out some bias because John Kiefer was almost like a mentor to me because I'm active duty military, and of course he was a major, retired Vietnam, and he came to me and he was one of the people that let me know, look, you don't have to put up with discrimination not only in the community but in the military too, and that can happen. It does happen. That's why fellows like Jason Torpey set up Military Association of Atheists and Freethinkers, which I'm also a part of, and John Kiefer was pivotal in helping me setting up my own group at MacDill Air Force Base. So you have to realize that me and John, we have something there. We're very good friends. As for EllenBeth, I've only really met her a few times, but I feel that I know her well enough that she's the kind of person that just look at the trouble she's in now simply for being who she is and wanting justice when it comes to her tax money. So I cannot see her being a person that would delve into the funds of an organization to use for her own, personal endeavors, legal endeavors. And one of the things, going back to what I had in my conversation with Matt Cooper, one of the things that really stood out to me was when he said that they used funds that were not approved by the committee, but then later stated that an oversight committee had been created after that. So there's some contradiction in what the Atheists of Florida is telling its members.
Thank you so much for all you said, Brandon.
Certainly.
All right. So EllenBeth, what would your comment be to that other than thank you? This gives me a little bit of insight what's going on.
Well, it doesn't surprise me that Matt Cooper would be out spewing hateful things about John and I. John called Matt Cooper simply to get some questions answered about the membership database when we were trying to put together the balloting. And it had nothing to do with the election. And when John, who was the president, called Matt to simply ask him a simple question about the database, Matt hung up on him and said he wouldn't speak with him.
Now, how hard can it be to put together election ballots? I mean,
it's not. It's very simple, and that's what's
why
so
are
ridiculous.
they making such a big? Yeah, I guess that's where it confuses me. It's like, why is this such a big deal? They're not that difficult.
That's exactly the point, Deborah. It's not that difficult. It's not that big a deal. What is the big deal is the fact that some of these people may not get reelected, and they wanted this election stopped. That's the big deal. What is the big deal is that Matt Cooper was not on the ballot because he was negligent in submitting his nomination late. That's the big deal. It's not the fact that John and I and Nan and Rob were on the elections committee. It wasn't just John and I. There were other people on the elections committee, and they're neglecting to tell the membership that.
Right.
Oh, man. Well, so it seems to me that the atheist community out there in Florida is going to have to do some damage control. And Joe Zemecki just asked me, what kind of things can be done at this stage? What can you do?
Well, at this point, I don't know that I can do a thing because from what I've heard, I haven't been told, I've been expelled. And from what I've heard, I haven't been told, they won't tell me why.
So, okay, I want to clarify this thing about being expelled. I've seen reports that you and John both resigned. Is this expelled thing something different from that? Or
yes, no, that's totally separate. As far as resigning, that had to do with our positions as president and vice president. I was actually acting president at the time this happened. They expelled us entirely from Atheists of Florida, from the membership rolls.
Oh, so you're not allowed to vote. You're not allowed. Oh, okay, I get it.
Well,
what
so I've been told.
That?
Is there what are the grounds for that?
Well, they haven't told us, and they refused to tell us.
That's one of the points that my wife made. She said it was probably one of the biggest factors in this whole thing was that even if John and EllenBeth had broken any bylaws, it's the way that the rest of the board went about it. It shut them down. It was a kangaroo court. And I've heard that term being thrown around in comments. They didn't let them speak. And even Rob Curry, which I know Rob Curry very well also, and he is always, no matter what group he is in, seems to be the voice of reason. And they completely shut him out too. They would not let any of them talk. And that right there tells me that there's just something wrong about not letting somebody speak their voice, especially when these very serious allegations come up against them.
Well, yeah, and go ahead.
What they did here was this would put Sheriff Grady Judd to shame what they did here. It was so despicable. At least I had to say, at least Grady Judd presented an indictment against me, and I got to see the charges.
Well, that I was just going to say the exact same thing. It just seems to me that this is even worse than these arrests that you went through, because you're being denied due process, and so the only due process that's available is to have a show like this to give your point of view and hope that maybe these folks will respond to that.
Well, they won't, and we know that they won't, because the only purpose for doing this was to get us out of the organization so they could keep control.
Well, and buy a building.
Right. Well, yes. that is the end goal.
And so how is this affecting, and Brandon, you can probably help me out with this too, how is this affecting the community out there in Florida?
Well, actually, I would probably be the worst person to ask right now, because I unfortunately had to move out of AOF territory last July, because I actually got restationed in the military. But I still considered myself, a member, and I still followed their actions. That's why I'm calling, because this still affects me. As for the community, actually, I did have something to say about at least the online portion. I'm hearing a lot of things said, very opinionated things said about EllenBeth herself. And the thing about EllenBeth is she is a very straightforward woman. She is one of those people that she knows what she wants. There's no beating around the bush with her. In fact, the very first time I met her was at an AOF picnic, and the first time we met, we got in an argument. I think it was over something like violent video games. But yes, a lot of people will see her and how she interacts, and they get a negativity off of it. Where you have to look past it, and it's really not a negative thing. Nobody would just see this person and say it's negative. But that seems like some of the people that are currently still with the AOF are taking it. They're looking at her personality. There was somebody in the AOF that, and this is a quote I pulled. I don't want to drop names because I'm not trying to stir the pot, but there was a quote that said, she, meaning EllenBeth, is an ego-driven person, and she sees herself on the national stage. She sees her arrest to be her ticket to where she needs to go. She doesn't feel the need to be a team player, and there's no baseline civility. Now, that, to me, does not describe the EllenBeth I know.
You know what it is, Deborah? And I'm going to put this out there, and I've said this before. Mm-hmm. If I had a penis, I would be viewed very differently.
That issue seems to come up. Wasn't there something with Richard Dawkins?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Simply because I'm aggressive and I'm abrasive. Because I'm a woman, and when I'm assertive and I'm sure of myself and I know what I want, I'm a goddamn bitch.
Well, it's funny. I was on the Thinking Atheist show a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about women that are in these cults and how they, seem to be stuck in them. And I told him, I said, my advice would be, because that's what my advice is release your inner bitch. It's okay. But it's true that when you do that, if you are assertive, all of a sudden you're a bitch. Yeah. And, I guess that's okay to say on Blog Talk. I don't know. We've got another caller. It's an 813 area code. Here we go. Hello, 813. Thank you for calling the God Discussion Show. You're on the phone with EllenBeth and Deborah.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
We are doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. My name is Michael. I'm from Tampa. I was a member in AOF from about 2002 to 2008. I participated in their cable access television show. I published a newsletter.
Michael Harvey.
That's me. How are you?
I wanted to get in touch with you.
I feel your pain. I know you do. I know exactly what you're going through. Probably not to the degree to which that, obviously, some of the things you've gone through. Obviously, I wasn't visited by the local brown shirts. But, I delivered the invocation to the Tampa City Council in 2004, and I got a lot of fallout and hate from that probably lost my job over that in the long run. But so I understand exactly where you're coming from and the pressure you're feeling right now. And
let me interject. Michael Harvey is a big activist. He took a huge risk for Atheists of Florida.
Okay.
Well, some would say that, yeah. Some would say that. You know, I wanted to just comment on a couple things. You know, I really applaud the work that you and John have done for AOF, and I think what's played out now is very unfortunate, but entirely in character for the same group of guys, those people with penises who have been running AOF for the last 10 to 15 years. I mean, this is just entirely in character for these people. So I wouldn't feel like the Lone Ranger, because if the group continues for much longer, it's going to happen again. Every few years ago, they have a big blowout, you know, and it's de rigueur for this group. I look upon them as a group that had the right intentions, but haven't been really that effective at their stated goals in any way. And every time they get somebody in there who does try to be effective and does try to take the group to the next level, they wind up being on the outs with the in-group.
Yes, I'm well aware of that, and I unfortunately am aware of your situation right now.
You know, my friend Joe Zemecki brought up the point. You know, he was a Texas director of American Atheists. Asked if you see sort of like a comparison what happened with Ellen Johnson with American Atheists. Is it sort of similar? What do you feel, EllenBeth?
You know, from my perspective, I would say no, because that was what happened with American Atheists was an extreme situation that involved, a very shady character who wound up, I think, doing violence. You're alluding to Madalyn Murray O'Hair, right?
No, Ellen Johnson.
No. Ellen Johnson.
Oh,
Ellen Johnson. I guess there's a similarity from what I recall, but anytime you have any sort of power struggle like this, it's just going to get ugly. And it's make no mistake. What happened this past Sunday was a well-orchestrated, planned in advance coup d'état.
Okay.
And I want to say something else too. There's something else probably everyone should be aware of here, that Mr. EllenBeth has been trying to fob off this piece of junk building to AOF for at least since 2007.
Oh, 2007. Oh,
there
and
has been talk about, using this building for AOF and possibly selling it after leasing it for a while since 2007, the middle part of 2007. I know this for a fact because I was in on some of the conversations.
Well,
so the hypothesis that EllenBeth is putting forth is not completely out of the realm of not only possibility but probability as well.
And I have the email and the board minutes to prove it.
Yeah, I don't doubt it at all. I mean, I think it's a very, very good likelihood that's part of the motivation here. But I think the biggest motivation, honestly, is that let's be honest. The building, I've seen the building. I've been in the building. I worked in the building.
Yeah.
$295,000. I'd give you $95,000 for it on a good day, and that's only if you paved the parking lot.
I know, and that's why we had a real issue with this, and that's why it was ridiculous. And I have the paperwork where he put it out that it was $295,000, and this is why I'm sitting here on the phone tonight talking to you as an expelled ex-president.
I resigned at the beginning of
people and just form a new group.
Some very, very, smart, creative people in AOF and some talented writers and just some people of the highest intellectual acumen and integrity, and I really miss some people there, but I'm talking about the in-group, the cognoscenti in the organization. They're the reason why AOF has really not grown significantly. I mean, let's just talk about the membership right out of the gate. The membership, when I also worked on the database as well, and the membership at the beginning of 2007 was right around 134, ironically enough. I'm not kidding. I know this for a fact. But without giving any details, so that's not a significant growth in membership. So that tells you that some of the ideas coming out of there to grow the organization and make it more palatable as invisible to the public is just not working. And anytime somebody comes along who has some fresh ideas and wants to try something new or push the envelope, they're viewed with suspicion and eventually hostility.
Right.
Yes.
And
we actually
is it possible you guys could get together and say if you have the database, could you not email the members and maybe just form a different group without that inner circle?
No, that would be unethical. No, we couldn't do that. And I'm speaking not so much from the detailed knowledge of the state the database may or may not be in now. That's just from my recollection of the state that it was in at the time I worked on it several years ago.
Well, what's interesting is that actually the database was distributed to the entire membership by accident by Matt Cooper when he was sending out these call for nominations. So it's not a state secret any longer. Every member has every other member's email address.
That's kind of
then what would be the issue then?
I'm sorry?
So what would be the issue of just sending out a group email?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, there was another thing I wanted to bring up for EllenBeth, just a quick question about the email that they sent out right after this all went down. This is actually something that my wife pointed out to me. I don't have the email pulled up, so I don't know the line verbatim, but there was something in there that mentioned their mission statement being basically what came down to proselytizing atheism. Now, of course, I don't really agree with that, but I was just wondering if that is a change from what it was before. I believe it is.
It is.
Let me jump in here because I have a little historical insight into this. You know, back in probably like around 2005 or so, there was another blowout that took place with another member whose name I don't want to mention, but he was very, very, very out front activist, would show up on street corners with signs and kind of like an in-your-face kind of guy. But he was extremely dedicated to the organization. And the founder of AOF found his methods rather unseemly and initiated kind of like a little conflict that created another series of infights that created another rift in the organization as well. Like I said, every couple years or so, something like this used to happen in AOF. But the founder, Christos, he really did not view AOF so much as an activist organization. But his initial vision, and I think this was in the original mission statement, was to act as an educational and outreach organization to promote the complete and total separation of church and state. That was Christos', I think, original vision. And he kind of looked upon the new in-your-face activism that was on the Atheist Forum television show and the radio show. He looked upon it as kind of unseemly.
And he still does.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. He's very old school and very, kind of like a dignified, noble kind of fellow. So he just doesn't think it's effective. I think I disagreed with him at the time, respectfully, but I think you really have to take a look at the other currents and the other philosophies that have gained momentum in the public sphere, and every one of them have been engaged in very, very, very strident and strategic forms of activism.
That is
right.
so
true.
Somebody
posted the line that I was speaking of in the chat. It stated, "Our goal is to get the liberating word out that atheist proposition is the most logical and consistent way to deal with reality." To me, that's verging on we want to go out there on the street corners and do exactly what the Christians are doing, and I don't agree with that. I mean, that's ridiculous.
And that was totally contrary to what John and I were about. We absolutely were opposed to doing any even arguing with Christians. We would not debate Christians. We didn't want to hold any debate.
What is the point in
none.
debating with a Christian? To paraphrase Bertrand Russell, you may as well try to convince the drunk crawling around on all floors that the hallucinations he or she is seeing are not real.
No, my analogy is it's like trying to get my cat off the back of the sofa. Screaming at him is not going to work. They're going to do what they damn well please.
Yeah, that
usually in a debate, the purpose isn't to convince the other person that you're debating. That's never really been the case. It's usually taking two sides and letting a neutral party view it to see which side they favor the most. I can understand not going over to an individual and trying to convince them, but holding a formal debate, I think does have lots of merit.
And I think that the whole two-side approach is the classic false dichotomy fallacy. I mean, there are never two sides to a story. There are many sides to a story. But the thing about it is there's only one side typically that has the preponderance of evidence and facts on their side. And that's what needs to be stressed. It needs to be inculcated in the public mind methodologies for determining, for vetting out the fact from the fiction and science from myth. And that's the real task in my mind as an activist and a free thinker to present these ideas to the public so that they don't seem anathema to them and they're not viewed with suspicion and just like another form of voodoo. And it really is a delicate balance to try to maintain.
You know, that's what we're trying to do with God discussion is that we're not taking a theistic or atheist position. We're more the big tent and report the news. But there's a lot of opinion pieces there. You know, Rihanna, who's in the chat room, is a humanist. We have a graduate from Liberty University. But I'll tell you one thing. When people get together and talk about church and state, it doesn't matter whether they're theist or deist or atheist or whatever. If they're progressive Christians, they generally support separation of church and state. And this is where I'm finding that there's common ground, and that's why I feel that the activism is so important.
You're right, and that's exactly the point that I try to make as well. Separation of state and church is valuable. It is valuable to everyone, regardless of what they believe or don't believe.
Absolutely, and I'm not opposed to having a discussion with religious people. I think you can have a dialogue with them, absolutely. But with Atheists of Florida, it's an activist organization that is supposed to go out there and look for violations of church and state. You heard my promo at the beginning of the show.
That was
well, yeah.
Drew me to the organization.
Absolutely.
It was that's what I saw. I didn't want to go to a church when I first looked these guys up. I thought, well, I need people of like mind to talk to about these things. And I wanted the social aspect. But then we started getting into the council meetings and all that. I mean, John and EllenBeth, this is what they did. This is what they did for Atheists of Florida. And I'm not singling them out and saying that they're the shining heroes because, of course, it took everybody else, too. It took everybody else's money to do these things that we were doing, and it was great. And now I'm seeing it turn around into something that, I might as well go to church on Sunday, or I can go to an AOF meeting. It's going to be the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a very good point. I'm gonna sign off here, and I just wanted to let you know that I really enjoyed speaking with you, EllenBeth, and maybe we can chat some more. And I'll try to get in contact with you through John Kiefer. By the way, real quick funny story before I sign off, okay? The morning that I gave the invitation to the Tampa City Council, John Kiefer was there. And John
I'm aware of that.
John shows up in his black atheist T-shirt with his Vietnam hat, looking like a total badass.
Why did that not surprise me?
I just felt so comfortable. I just walked up to the podium. I mean, after they got done with their little 23 minutes hoo-ha to try to prevent me from speaking, and I stood my ground and I gave the speech, and I just looked over my shoulder, and John was there, just standing up, just like a total badass, like a guardian angel. I mean, to use, to coin a phrase metaphorically, of course. But it was a really, really good feeling that morning, and that's what we got to recapture.
Absolutely. Michael, we will be in touch.
Rob,
take care, all.
Michael. Okay, thank you so much for calling.
Bye-bye.
Oh, yeah, great call.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the thing is that I think there needs to be a little bit of damage repair or something going on. EllenBeth, what do you suggest? Or, I mean, what do you think?
What's really interesting is that so many of the members of Atheists of Florida are outraged at this, as exactly what Michael put it, a coup d'etat that took place. This was a prearranged decision to execute John and I. And when we walked into this board meeting last Sunday, there was going to be no discussion. There was going to be nothing else that happened that day. There was one thing on the agenda, and that was to boot us out, and that's what happened. And to tell us that we can't speak, that we can't hear the charges against us, and that we can't appeal is just anathema to the humanistic, atheistic principles that and the skeptic principles that we are all used to.
And for the principles you're trying to promote.
Absolutely. For the membership to hear this and for Atheists of Florida to refuse to answer members' questions reasonably and logically and rationally, it just tells them something fishy is up. There's not something right.
Somebody in the chat room said, don't you all feel that people respect and listen to people that speak reasonably and logically? When these cat fights go viral, logical people think, that they're all like that, just like the fanatics that you're fighting.
Yeah, and
that's
this
the
is
danger of this.
I have been so vocal with other organizations about the fact that, look, we can't put our fights out to the public because we need to bond together because there's so few of us against so many of them. So when this happens in this organization, when we were doing so much good, I am just sick to my stomach because I see the ramifications that are going to happen with the religious people in the community here. I already see it taking effect. I see all the work that I have, and all the people behind me have done in the last year and a half. I hate to say that it's going to go into vain. I really don't want it to.
Somebody in the chat room, callers, if you want to call in, you can do so. Otherwise, I'm going to just forward some comments from the chat room to you, EllenBeth. First of all, there's some appreciation for all your work, but Rich Civil asks, he says, I just hope this whole affair does not hurt the efforts to fight for church and state separation. Do you think that it's going to have an impact on that?
Well, I certainly hope not. I certainly hope not. What I do think it may hurt is the Atheists of Florida as it stands today. I know, seeing what Atheists of Florida, the board that who comprises the board, I know if I looked at this organization and what just happened, I certainly wouldn't want to join it, and I wouldn't want to be a member of an organization that could treat its members the way that they just treated us. Obviously, I have a bias, but I'm hearing from a lot of other members who are saying, I'm walking. You can't do that to people. Regardless of, let's set aside, okay, I'm going to even assume for the moment that any one of the allegations are true. Don't just boot somebody out without giving them a chance to say a word.
Well, yeah, that's the whole foundation of the law is due process. Well, not the whole foundation, but a big chunk of it is due process. May I ask how much the membership fees are on an annual basis there?
$20.
Okay, $20, and you have, at most, let's say 200 members. That's not a real lot of money to be buying a building at $100,000 or more.
Oh, when he was offering it was $300,000. And we're not talking about a nice building, Taj Mahal building. This building needs a lot of work done to it as well. There's 2 parking spots.
And so with that type of thing, then you have liability for creating handicapped access and all these, who knows what kind of repairs, the insurance, the taxes. I mean, so it's not just, that's not the only chunk of money. Is it something that could be rented out where there'd be some kind of return on the investment?
Yes, and there wouldn't be property taxes, and that goes into a whole other issue about the property tax because they, 2 of the board members, the one who owns the building and another one came up with this, let's just put it, creative concept to get out of paying the property tax and then actually ending up turning the building back over to Ed. It's just so ridiculous.
Joe noted in the chat room that it's kind of like the socials versus the activists. And I think he's driving home kind of good point there. It's almost like these people that say, oh, well, there's these militant atheists out there. That's kind of the new term. If you're an activist, you're militant all of a sudden. And It's like, why can't we go back to the good old days where everybody sits around and talks about, biblical contradictions and that kind of thing? And, I think that we're at a stage now because of the Internet. A lot of that information is already out there. If people want to find out about it, they're going to find it with YouTube or articles or whatever, but there comes to be a point where you have to do something about it. That's kind of where I'm at. That's why I do this show. That's why I put out a lot of money for God discussion. And, how do you feel about that whole issue?
Well, militant atheist is somebody who simply tells somebody I'm an atheist. An angry atheist is somebody who tells a Christian, I don't believe in God. It's ridiculous.
I think there's some anger, and I got into this with Dr. Liz with the Dawkins Foundation, and I think it's justifiable where, when you go through that stage like, oh my gosh, everything I have believed in and have been doing, it's a lie, and you feel very angry about it. Or
there's
let's say that this... Right.
Yeah, but there's a difference between being angry and being labeled an angry atheist. And it's funny because I have on my Google profile as my tagline, I wasn't an angry atheist until the Christians started persecuting me. I have things that I'm angry about, without a doubt.
And I think EllenBeth touched on something there. I think she touched on something there very personal, because even when I was part of the organization, I heard a few members, not a majority, but a few members really express ill will towards the way EllenBeth goes about things. And I said, look, what don't you like? And the word loudmouth was thrown around. And I'm like, wasn't Martin Luther King a loudmouth? Would you back in the day say that he should shut up or he should be less vocal about what we need? I mean, I'd never once heard EllenBeth say to somebody of a different belief space, you're just an idiot, and that's the way it is. No, that's not how she works. But for whatever reason, these people are taking it like that, and I think it's going to come to a split in AOF. John was very vocal too, in his own different way. But this is what's ridiculous about this whole thing. You have grown adults; they can't look at this situation in a respective light, an objective light. And everybody's just taking everybody else's word for it. They're not looking at the facts and seeing what is actually going on here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It goes back to the fact that I will get called a loudmouth, but John will get called assertive and confrontational.
Do you think that this is sort of a microcosm of something bigger going on in the atheist community, or is this just more confined to Florida?
Oh, I think it's absolutely part of what's going on in the atheist community. I've seen it across the board where women get marginalized and minimalized and set aside. It's very unfortunate, and we saw a big blow-up about this summer, unfortunately. But it's been happening for a long time. And it's not just the atheist community, frankly. It has to do a lot with just, rampant sexism and leftover sexism. I think people don't realize that, even though you come to an atheistic viewpoint, a humanistic viewpoint, unfortunately you still tend to hold on to some of those religious dogmatic principles that we grew up with, and it's very hard to let go of. And a lot of that is sexism. We're inundated with it every day, all day long. We watch TV, and what do we see? Women doing the housework, women doing the shopping, women, doing the cleaning and taking care of the children.
Well, beyond the sexism, too, do you think that because I personally have not experienced a lot of that, but on the other hand, also, do you think that there's an issue with, how do I even put it? The chosen leaders, some people that perceive themselves to be sort of like in charge of everything, and they're the popular people, and everyone sort of masses after them. And so then when they have somebody like you and John who show up and they do things a little bit differently, all of a sudden you're like changing the path. I mean, is there a lot of resistance to new ideas, new voices, new people?
Well, I think that's inevitable. Nobody nobody likes change. People get comfortable in whatever position they're at, and especially when they feel threatened that they're going to lose, a role in an organization they've had for a long time. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh my gosh, I've been involved in this organization for so long, I'm going to be set aside and made irrelevant. And fear strikes, and people lash out. Whereas instead of trying to reach out and become a part of the new direction of the organization.
Man, this is... okay, our caller line is 914-338-0452. If anyone wants to call, you need to do so quickly here. Otherwise, EllenBeth, I'd like you to sort of give your closing remarks on what lessons there are to be learned from this for the community as a whole.
Well, what lessons there are to be learned, I'm going to simply say this. Do not be afraid to speak out about church-state violations. This is so important, especially in this age of Michelle Bachmann's and Rick Perry's and Kane's and what is going on with personhood amendments. And it's ridiculous. They're trying to take away the Blaine Amendment in Florida, where we have absolute no aid clauses, and they're trying to fund religious institutions. We need people to absolutely be willing to speak up and step up. And regardless of what's happened with myself and with John Kiefer and with the Atheists of Florida, it is well worth the fight, because it is not just about me. It's not just about John. It's not just about AOF. It's about you. It's about the Christian. It's about the Jew. It's about the Muslim. It's about all of us as taxpayers. And it's about the next generation.
I agree with that so much. I so agree. Brandon, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Did I hear your voice in the background there? I wasn't sure if it was you or HD.
Oh, yes, I said amen to that.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know why.
Well, you're in the military.
They're taking it personally. They're making this a personal thing against EllenBeth and John. I don't see it. I don't see why. EllenBeth and John have never done anything personally, for themselves through the organization, in a selfish manner. It just doesn't make sense.
You're in the military, and there's all this proselytizing taking place with that. I've worked with, we just had Chris Rada on with Military Religious Freedom Foundation, and the Military Atheists, I like that organization as well. And so you're in a position really to understand how important this is, that we honor separation of church and state. I mean, you can't have people running around with Bible verses on their gun scopes in a Muslim country.
And if you ask anybody that's in the military, whether they're active, reserve, or guard, any branch, and they're non-religious, probably their chief complaint will be that they do not feel as though they can go to a chaplain for help with specific issues. They only have one of the options is to go to mental health. Mental health, more times than not, will go on your record. And it's a bad thing. I mean, it seems a bad thing if you show up at mental health. It's sad because it's a perception, because somebody sees that on your record and says, well, this guy went to mental health. You must have something wrong with him. Of course I have something wrong with me. I don't believe in God. It's ridiculous. So
you're addressing the humanist chaplains, atheist chaplain thing. There was we wrote a story about On God discussion and had quite a bit of traffic about that very issue, because you can't go to these clergy. You need somebody, sort of in that same area that you can have a fiduciary, confidential discussion with without being classified as having a mental health problem. Well, have you had to take those spiritual fitness tests?
I'm in the Air Force. The Army's test was completely different. We did have a survey that was very similar, and it did have a spiritual section. But the Air Force, and this is what I like about the Air Force, is they did it in a slightly more PC manner. There was no scores, where the Army's test had a score. Like at the end of the spiritualization test, if you would answer it in an atheistic worldview, you would have gotten a low score on it. It would have said, look, there's something wrong with you as a soldier. That's where the issue was. The issue wasn't necessarily asking them questions. The one that the Air Force put out was more of a survey. It wasn't a test. It wasn't to gauge where you're at as an airman. It was just a survey. And in fact, after that survey, several months after that survey, the Air Force came out with freedom of religion training for everybody. Everybody had to do this on the computer. It was like a slideshow. And I loved it. It touched on all bases of respecting belief and non-belief. I was floored by it. I was like, this is fantastic. Because you won't see that in a lot of places.
That really is fantastic. You know, Joe said over here, well, now I lost the comment, but he feels, EllenBeth, that what you have, you know, you're such an inspiration, and that and that you and John will influence more activists. I agree, and Joe is probably one of the most active people I've ever met in my life.
I know he is.
So for him to say that is quite a compliment, and you know, and I compliment you too, because you really have put yourself out there for what you've done. And this issue is so important.
It is. It really is. And that's why this is so sad, because this could be such a great time for Atheists of Florida and such a great time for Polk County to learn what atheists are and what we're about, and it's being really made to be a debacle.
We've got another caller. This looks like a Skype number, so I have no idea what area code this is. Hello, caller. Thank you for calling the God Discussion Show.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, I've got to turn you up 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I was on the computer and the phone. The conversation I'm hearing on the phone is different than the conversation I'm hearing on the computer.
Yeah, there's a time lag.
Oh. By several minutes.
So,
yeah.
10 minutes, really? Okay, well, I'm going to be quiet so you can talk without having to hear an echo or whatever.
No, it's not an echo. It's just I'm still at the conversation about the surveys being passed out in the Air Force versus the Army.
Oh, good. Please tell us about that.
Oh, well, I was in the Army, active duty, 4 or 5 years. And I don't know what this gentleman is, I don't know what his experience is. I can't obviously speak for him, but the data's clearly not shown. I had no problems being either gay or an atheist. My colonel knew, Sergeant Major knew, no one had problems with it. So I don't think it's fair to generalize the military as a whole as being anti-atheist or whatever.
And you're right, and it isn't a generalized concept that I can go to anybody in my squadron and say, oh yeah, I'm atheist. And very few people within my squadron are going to have issues with it. The issues that I and organizations like MAF take with it is there's no support for atheists and non-religious people like there is for religious people. And in fact, in some ways it does work against us. My wife and I, when she was my fiance, we wanted to get married in the chapel. We were just going to have, we weren't religious at the time, but we weren't really calling ourselves atheists. We just weren't religious. We were just going to have a Protestant ceremony for my family, and that was going to be that. Well, I lived with her at the time. I had gotten back from a deployment, and I moved in with her and her mother-in-law. And the Protestant chaplain said he would not marry us simply because we lived together. Now that's, I guess, his right as a person, but he's not performing his duties as a chaplain. He's actually going against the regulations and just assuming that because we lived together, we were having carnal relations. That was his assumption.
And even if you were, what is it? Is his business?
None of his business.
Well, I'm just curious, when that happened, what was your response?
Well, back then, like I said, I definitely wasn't as vocal as I am now about these issues, and we walked out of the. Actually, the chaplain first gave us a different chaplain, a Catholic chaplain, actually, and this guy was the nicest guy. I mean, he was so nice. He helped us with everything. Long story short, we ended up getting married in a different location because the chapel never called me back, and they finally called me back like a couple of days before we were going to get married. So I said, you know what, we're just not going to get married in the chapel. So we ended up having a non-denominational ceremony out on the beach in Clearwater, Florida. It was beautiful. So it actually worked out for us. But, you know, I was just saying, I'm not. I definitely don't see the military as this giant industrial hate machine against minorities, and everybody does get acceptance. And furthermore, if I brought up an instance in my squadron where I was discriminated against, I have no doubt in my mind that they would burn the people or person that discriminates against me. My big issue is with the chaplaincy. I'm the first person to tell you that I believe the chaplains do a very, very important job, and I'll be the last person to say we should get rid of them. But that being said, they need to reach out to everybody, and there are really good chaplains out there. The wing chaplain at MacDill, for example, was very, very receptive of myself and John Kiefer setting up the Military Atheist Association as Atheists and Freethinkers chapter, and he let us use the chapel for our monthly meetings. It was great. So, but the pervasiveness behind it is there. You should know, being in the Army, that your supervisors over you, in some instances, they can make or break your career. So what happens to the airman or the private or the seaman that gets that one supervisor that happens to have a religious pitch, and he takes it out on this non-religious person?
Gee, I don't know. Just off the top of my head, I'm thinking Inspector General's office. Or here's an idea that, and this is just me. Maybe I'm different, but let's say that I were going to get married, and one chaplain said, "No, I'm sorry, you can't use our chapel." And then I ran across this other chaplain to whom I was referred by the previous chaplain.
Mm-hmm.
I would mention, X, Y, Z about the first chaplain. We'll call them Chaplain 1 and Chaplain 2.
Right.
Instead of saying, well, it's the man trying to keep me down, and this one chaplain's being a complete douche, so I'm not going to press it. That is not a successful strategy for resolving the issue.
Oh, no, I completely agree. And like I said, at that time in my life, I was not vocal. In fact, at that time in my life, I was very confused about what to make of it, because I'd grown up in a religious family. I went to church when I was a kid, and even though I met a lot of people that spoke some things that were kind of hateful or maybe a little bigoted, I never actually saw anybody perform or do something bigoted towards another person, especially in front of them. So this was my very first confrontation with somebody that discriminated. I mean, it was discrimination. There's no two ways about it. They discriminated against me simply because I did not believe as they did. And it doesn't matter if you're a chaplain, a supervisor, or a coworker. That's wrong.
And I think that's kind of... kind of circling this back into, the discussion with EllenBeth, in some ways it seems like the same issue is going on with you. You have no recourse or who to go to.
No, it's not recourse. Yeah. It's that people don't avail themselves of the legal recourse they have. That's built into the system, specifically to marginalize the, I don't know what language we're allowed to use, but the jerks like the Protestant chaplain who would not make the chapel available to this gentleman and his then fiancé.
There may be recourse that seems to be available. In fact, but in fact, there is not really legal recourse. Now, if you look at the bylaws of Atheists of Florida, it says that expelled members have a right to appeal their expulsion. But who do we get to appeal to? We get to appeal to the people that just expelled us. So is that really recourse?
Well, and that's been a complaint, I think, with the MRF people. Caller, thank you for calling. I've muted you because we're starting to run out of time here. EllenBeth, I'm curious. He brought up I'm not sure who. I think it was Brandon who said this. Did you come from a religious background, or were you always a free thinker, atheist?
I was brought up in a conservative Jewish family, and I turned my back on it probably about the age of 12 or 13 after my bat mitzvah. I didn't ever really believe, but from the time that I could actually read the Bible, and at Seder's when we would sit down and read the Haggadah, and I would read about Noah and Moses traveling the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, and all the parting the Dead Sea and the Red Sea, and thinking, wow, this is all nonsense. This doesn't. I have a video I did actually for the Thinking Atheist, and you'll see me. I'm like, this just doesn't jive. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So no, I from a very young age I realized that this is all, Jonah never spent 7 days in the belly of a whale, and Noah didn't have all these gazillion animals on his ark.
And the donkey didn't talk?
No, the donkey didn't talk. Eve's not responsible for everybody's sin.
Oh, I used to have so much trouble with that. Oh my gosh, I used to have so much trouble with that. Okay, now I've asked the people in the chat room, since we only have a couple minutes left, for their last minute questions here. Ubat said that he or she would love to know what people could do to support you at this point.
Well, at this point, things are still really much up in the air. I'm not sure what we're going to do at this point, but please do stay in touch. I think you know how to get in touch with me, either on Facebook or by email. My email is mycatsaremygods@gmail.com.
Can you say that again so people can hear it?
My cats are my gods.
My cats are my gods @gmail.com. Oh, I love it. I love it. Mariana, who's there, is a cat person. I'm a cat person myself. Let's see. I'm not quite sure what Joe is asking here, so I'll skip that. Well, I guess that. Hitch wants to know, and I'm not sure what you can answer this. What are your plans for the future if AOF, I love this choice of words, excommunicate you?
I think AOF has already excommunicated me. I'm not sure, but they haven't told me. I think they might be burning me at the stake next.
Oh my gosh. Great choice of words. Okay. I don't see anything else going on here, but in the chat
I can tell you this for sure: you haven't heard the last of me.
I believe you. And I'm so grateful that you were on the show, and I really do believe that there is a lot for everybody to be learning from this whole situation. When you get these little cliques and power groups and that kind of, I don't know what it is about groups that seems to suck that kind of energy into it. Maybe there's, I don't know. I mean, how do you prevent that from happening?
I don't know, but I just want to make an aside out there that I do happen to be president of the Atheists of Florida Association also at this point. So I am not an atheist activist without a group.
So the humanist organization there now, is that in the same town and everything, or how can they get in touch with that?
It is.
You know what I think it is, EllenBeth? I think that Todd Bentley and all of these Christian dominionists that are hanging out there in Lakeland have been beating their drums and doing their chants and sending out negative energy at you. It's 11/11/11, and they're saying, yes, mission accomplished, this is transformation.
Oh, I can tell you, do you know that I actually have, believe it or not, I actually have Christian friends who tell me that my name comes up in church quite often. I get prayed over all the time.
Really?
Oh, yes.
I love it. I absolutely, who knows? But anyway, we're down to a couple minutes. So any more closing remarks and, what people can do that want to support you in this?
Well, yes, what they can do is they can send more emails of outrage to the board at AOF and demand answers and accountabilities, because what the board is saying is absolutely false, defamatory, and outrageous. And for them to go around making these allegations is just absolutely, totally horrific for them to do. It just appalls me. This is what they did to John and I is worse than what